The dependency inversion principle states that high-level modules should not depend on the low-level modules. Both should depend on abstractions. Abstractions should not depend on details. Details should depend on abstractions. Let's take a look at this example. We have a class user repository with method getUserById, and we have another class user service which have a direct instance of user repository. GetUser method is using the instance of user repository to fetch users by ID. There are few problems with this code. One is the user service is tightly coupled with the user repository. And another problem is if you want to use different implementation of user repository, you cannot easily do it. For instance, you want to swap your user repository to user repository with different database. So here our high level module, which is iUser service, is depending on the low level module, which is user repository. Let's refactor this example. We have introduced an interface iUser repository with method getUserById. User repository implements the iUser interface. Now user service is depend on the iUser repository. User service class is depend on abstraction, not on concretion, which make user service and user repository loosely coupled. User service is not responsible for instantiating the user repository. If you have another repository, example user repository with different database which implements the iUser repository, you can pass its instance instead of user repository. You can easily swap user repository with another repository, but the condition is it should implement the iUser repository. User service don't care if you pass the instance of user repository or user repository with different database because both implements the same interface. You might be wondering what is inversion. What are we inverting here? First, we need to understand the traditional approach. Traditionally, high-level modules depends on the low-level modules. If we consider our first example, our dependency injection is like user service is depending on the user repository. Our high-level module is depending on the low-level module. But using the DIP, user service depend on the iUser repository, which means we are depending on the abstractions. A high-level module is depending on the abstraction and low-level module is also depending on the abstractions. So both module is not directly interconnected. That's it for now. See you next time.